How you doing? My name is Byron Woodson, and I am the host for this rip-roaring adventure called the Dream Create Hustle course. It is designed to make sure that you have a reliable process that you can use in any area of your life to achieve, create, and execute all of your goals. It's called Dream Create Hustle. If regularly you would call it thinking, planning, and acting. The construction industry calls it design, build, operate. Many names. I just think Dream, Create, Hustle sounds cool. So it is actually 3 stages and 9 phases. So we're now in the dream stage where we imagine a better reality that we want to live into and work towards. And we went through the design course already, and now this is the Discover course or module or class for this. And in this one, what we're going to do is we are going to figure out what it takes to actually accomplish whatever goal we choose. So in the design phase, we think about what it is that we wanted to create, how we want to do that. In the discover phase, what we're looking at is different ways that we can implement, create, or do those designs. And so this is a broad search. We do research and we look around the world. We look around our lives to figure out what it is that it would take for us to achieve our goals. So that is, and then, the next module or the next stage of this would be called draft. And in draft, what we do is we create a blueprint or a model for what it is that we want to create after we chose what we wanted to in the discover phase. So the design is we think about something, the discover is we do some research, and the draft is we create a vision of what it is that we want to create. Cool. And in discover, what I like to do is I talk about searching for solid ground, because in the dream phase or the design phase, what we're doing is we're thinking about things in general. And, if you wanted to build a house, you can build a house anywhere, but a house has to go somewhere. And that's where the solid ground is. In the construction industry, the discover phase might, you might think of it in terms of the people called the surveyors. They'll go to a site, look at the, soil composition, look at the rain, the drainage, and, all of that stuff that deals with the actual ground, and figure out how they can build whatever it is that they wanted to build in the, whatever the person chose in the design phase there. So in this, the construction industry, they call it survey. Building websites, it's a discovery process. We got to figure out what we're going to build. So that's what this is. Now, usually when people start to worry about what it is they're going to do after they have defined an intention, they got to think about whether it's the right thing to do. And that's not something that you can go look for externally. That's more of an internal, hey, is this the right thing for me? Do I want to do this? When John F. Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon, is that the right thing for us to do? It was definitely inspiring, and it created a whole lot of, industries and a lot of incitement about things. And, could we have just put somebody into space? Yeah, but the moonshots, they're further, it's harder. We're going to do it. Then you figure out whether it's, people also struggle about whether something's feasible or not. When John F. Kennedy said we're going to put somebody in the moon, we had no idea how to do that. So between when he said that and the end of the decade, they basically created the manned aerospace industry. And, the next, they had to figure out what the situation is, what resources do they have available to them? How big is the ship going to have to be to carry a couple people? How are they going to get food? How are they going to get oxygen? How are they going to get water? How are they going to get through the atmosphere? How are they going to get around the Earth? How are they going to get around the moon? How do we have to, how do we build guidance systems? How do we communicate with them? These are things that you have to think about. And, you got to do some research once you figure out, oh, well, I'm going to have to do this and I'm going to have to do that. You do research about what cutting edge technology is, what standard technology is, and, how you can use that. And then we have what are other ways to solve this problem. If you're hungry, you might go for burgers, you might go for burritos, you might go for air biscuit sandwiches and go hungry because you don't feel like getting out of bed. You may not actually solve the problem. So, and people struggle with these types of things when they're thinking about large undertakings like, do I want to do this with my life? Is our company headed in the right direction? Is our project on track, etc.? So we'll go through and explore some of those struggles. And what this module is going to do is going to help you go from being not sure about whether it's possible at all or for you, because you might think somebody can do it but not me, and you'll know what it would take to achieve and learn and do to achieve that. So it's not just, hey, can I do this now? Usually no. There are usually a lot of things that you have to learn, and mindsets that you have to create in order to get to a goal. There's a phrase that says, what got you here isn't going to get you there. So part of the process of discovery is to looking at what you would have to transform yourself or your company or your team into in order to affect this goal. So no longer are you going to blindly assume, success or failure. So you won't be like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that because I'm going to fail, because you're learning what you have to learn and what you have to do. You have a lot more detail about the things you can do, the things you can't do, the time frames in which you can learn and do them, and the different roadblocks and obstacles and the path through and around all of those, so that you can actually get to your goal. Instead of just blindly assuming that you're going to succeed, you can actually see how you're going to do that. And instead of blindly assuming that you're going to fail, you can see a path forward that keeps you on the road to success. And then overestimating or underestimating what's required. I'm not sure that everybody thought it was possible to put a man on the moon inside of a decade. There might have been a 20-year goal or a 30-year goal, but with enough time, attention, and funding, you can pretty much do almost anything. So even though that's a general, hey, that's possible, what we're going to do is talk about how you can figure out what's actually required to make your vision happen. And you'll be doing that based on reliable information that you go search and find, and maybe sometimes event. So we're going to kind of move from designing things to designing ways to get it done. So, on the left, we're going to, if you wanted to go somewhere, you got to go from point A to B. You could walk, you could rent a truck, you could fly a plane, you can hop on a drone. And instead of looking at those, individual modes and methodologies, we're going to look at how all of those can participate in, taking you from one place to another. Whether you want to go from Arizona to Kentucky or from, Maine to Arizona and back. So we got to figure out, what roads you got to use, what streams you have to cross, and rest stops. Definitely a lot of rest stops. And what that's going to get you is you're going to be able to figure out where your prize is. So, you create this map or the model of what's going on. You start choosing, hey, I want to do it this way. Hey, I want to do it that way. Or I do want this, I don't want that. And now that you understand the lay of the land, you'll be able to chart a path from where you are to where you want to be. And of course, if you want to change where you want to go, since you've done all this research, you can pick a better goal. Nobody says that you have to stick to it all of the time. Sometimes quitting is great because you can quit things that are not good for you. That's a good thing. So what you'll be able to do is, since you have this new knowledge and information, you may change your goal. You may say, hey, I don't want to go to college and spend 5 years doing X. I'm going to double up on classes, take, 20 credits and, graduate in 3 years. Whatever you find during the research phase and discover phase allows you to change what it is that you want to do, make it better for you, or make it better for the people that you're trying to invent or, supply something to. Now, one of the things we also talk about in the Dream, Create, Hustle course is that each phase has a central question. The question of the design phase was why? Why am I doing this? Why does this person want it done? And the why actually helps focus your attention on what are the core requirements that they need to get something done. Why do you want to take a picture? So you can remember it when you're older, because people have bad memories. Yes. So you can show other people. Cool. You can take a video too. that's just as good because now we have phones that can record and, show stuff to people all of the time. So, maybe you have three, maybe you create a painting instead. Takes a lot more time. So if you wanted to do that in a short period of time, picture is definitely the way to go. So the why helps you figure out what it is that you want to do. And for the discover phase, it's whether. So this is the question, you can come up with a lot of ideas and you just have to figure out which ones are right for you. What do you want to spend your time, your energy, your money, and your attention on? And you figure out whether this is feasible, whether it's something that you want to do, whether it's something that you want to do in this particular timeline, or with the particular resources that you have, whether you want to deal with somebody else that is doing this. So the core question we're figuring out is the conditions inside of which we will say yes to doing this. So yeah, weather conditions. Yeah, that's funny. Um, So yeah, so we look at the conditions, we look at the situations, we look at the contexts, and so some of the core themes that we're looking at are the context, the climate, terrain, groundwork, and orientation. This sounds very very Sun Tzu-y. And what I mean by Sun Tzu is he wrote a book called The Art of War, and he outlined some things, and it was a pretty cool book, but he outlined some things to figure out how generals can make good decisions when they do go to war. One is the context. So, the context is a very, general thing, no pun intended. And the general thing for the context is, do you want to continue relationships with this, whoever you're going to war for? Is war going to benefit you? Is war not going to benefit you? When do you go to war and when don't you go to war? Whether it's good, right? And the climate, when you go to war or you go to battle, the climate is it going to be too cold? Do you want to attack when it's cold? Do you have the resources to keep all your troops fed and warm in the cold? Napoleon went to war and he marched over to Russia and got thrashed because he didn't have enough, it was getting cold and he didn't have the manpower, the material, and the supply chains to keep all of the food coming to the troops. So he lost lots and lots of troops. Same thing happened with Hitler. So what you have to do if you're going to, become a general, you have to figure out what the climate is. And, in business context, the climate is more, are people going to be buying these things? In 2001, somebody come out with the Android phone. We'd be like, what's this? It wasn't until Steve Jobs came out with this great presentation and told us about the iPhone, that everybody's like, I need one of those. And then he created the App Store and people created programs for that. And we said, I need Angry Birds or, I need to play chess with friends. So, and he could only create that, the iPhone or previously the iPod. Yeah, the iPod. When the technology hit. One of the great things about the iPod was that, it didn't take up a whole lot of batteries like MP3 players and Walkmans. And so, one of the core things that the iPod was able to do was use what we now know as SSD drives, which is solid state drives, which doesn't have to spin a little magnetic disc to get information. So because it doesn't have to have that motor, it drains the battery a lot less, and it accesses and writes information a lot faster than regular discs. And to be able to put that in a portable, skinny little thing with a nice little circular interface, game changer, because it made carrying around all of your songs easy. I think one of the marketing pitches was all the songs you love in your pocket, or something like that. Now that could only happen when people were used to listening to songs. If nobody knew what music was, that would have been a dumb invention. But since people make and listen to a lot of music, and that was a big hit. And then we got the terrain, and the terrain is kind of like the lay of the land. Like what are your competitors doing? What are there competitors? When Best Buy opened up, there was not a lot of just electronic stores. There was Radio Shack, but Radio Shack had pliers and tweezers and soldering irons. They didn't have, what were the, 36-inch TVs. Remember, those were big TVs and heavy. There were not a lot of places dedicated to that had game systems and everything electronic that you need, printers, computers. So they came out with a new category, that was, Best Buy is known as what's called a category killer. And they just flooded the country with these big blue stores with white lettering. And they did great because they were in, they've carved out a niche in the market that nobody was really doing, well or at scale. Boom. The groundwork is okay, cool. So context is very general. Climate is like, what's going on. The broad processes, in general trends. Terrain, you would think of in more of a short term, 3 to 6 month trend. And groundwork is kind of, depending on how I say the next example, it's either, right now or permanent. So the word groundwork is from construction. When you dig up the foundation, that's called groundwork. I think the technical term is, geotechnical engineering. Yeah, that's a technical term. And basically what they do is they look at the dirt, they figure out if you're going to build a 15-story building, you got to put pylons in it. So you got to dig out the dirt, fill it with concrete to make the pylons that go into the dirt and hold the building up so it doesn't fall and sway. Whether you're in a earthquake zone or you got high winds, you have to account for that too. But the groundwork is everything under the building that goes into the building. It includes, the municipal services that are connected to the building. And I'm using that metaphor to talk about the things underlying or undergirding all of your plans and your competitors' plans or your other people's plans that are on your team. If you are in charge of a project at work and most of your team is assigned to other departments or projects, part of the groundwork is figuring out, okay, how can you make it so that everybody on this team is, when they're on the team, dedicated to the goals of the team rather than, distracted for and doing all of these other things that they have to do because business is complex, right? And then orientation is kind of, now that you have like the groundwork is where are you facing? So, like where's your goal? How far is it? It's in a general direction. I know, people talk use a lot of metaphors about a journey and, are you headed in the right direction and where are you going and how fast are you going? Whereas the orientation metaphor I want to use is that you actually have a couple different ways to orient yourself. I'm looking forward and that's behind me. This is my right, that's my left. I am standing in a building. I am in the back of the building, and I'm looking at a side of the building. So I say, yeah, go to the wall that's closer to X. Something outside. It might be, the next building over. It might be a street. So that's a different way to orient yourself. You can orient yourself, according to who you are and which way you're facing. Are you laying down? Are you standing up? Are you running? And then you can orient to other buildings around you, terrain. Hey, that mountain over there, that the stream the stream that we just crossed a couple minutes ago. If you're on a walk or a journey, and you can orient like that, and then you'll talk to people and give them directions according to that orientation system. And inside of that orientation system, you also have north, east, south, and west. So and that's where the Earth is. So you look at north, and for me, it's that way. Right, for you, I don't know which way it is. And south is that way, west is that way. So, you say, hey, on a long journey, what you want to do is make sure that the sun sets on your right. So, if you're on this long journey and going, if the sun keeps setting on your right, then you're in the general right direction. You're oriented the right way. And then, of course, the largest orientation system is the stars, more specifically the zodiac, I guess. And the zodiac they would use as, more specific than the North Star because, there's more travel east and west than it is north and south, I guess. So So basically what I want to get across here is that when you're doing discovery, you have to realize that you're also going to have to do research at multiple levels. So there's the internal level of, kind of where you are facing. There's the external level of, like where you are in a short period of time, or, what you are close to, what you are far from. And then there's, a larger context inside of that, and maybe even a larger context inside of that. So when you're doing research for a new thing, all of this might be jumbled. It'll take you a while to discover, the keywords that mean at a particular orientation. Like left and right is different from north and south, which is different from, that's right, up and down, So you gotta be worried about that. And in the general world of design thinking and design processes, the first step we talked about a little bit, or maybe a lot of it, was empathize and define. That was in the design course, and now we're talking about discover, which is we come up with ideas and we look at other people's ideas about how to solve a problem, accomplish a goal, perform a project, etc. So these are the different ways and methodologies and processes that we can use to do what it is that we want and accomplish what we need. So in here, there's a nice little curvy graph. What we have is the beginning on the left. We have the design challenge, and you'll see that it's, kind of focused. And the research is, now you'll notice that the research is the broadest phase. So it has the widest, it's a cast of wide net. And it does that, we do a lot of research because we want to make sure that when we say, hey, we're going to do this, it's, the right or appropriate thing. And that's part of the research phase, getting enough information to figure out whether one option is better than the other, given the time frame and the resources, or another option is better, giving a longer or a shorter time frame and resources. Sometimes you might have two goals, so you have to create something that allows for you to make a decision further down the line. So in the creating of cars, Toyota production system had a system where they would create a new chassis for a car, and they would sell that at the high end. So like there's like let's just say it's the Accord and the Civic, right? So what they would do is they would build a completely new chassis and put that at the top of the line, and that would be the new Accord platform. And that includes the transmission and the actual chassis that everything sits on, the engine block, etc. All the dimensions of that, and then they would sell that, of course, for a higher price because it's a bigger car, and then they would sell that for 2 or 3 years, and then what they would do is they would then create another car, and then move the Civic onto the newer platform. So, every couple of years, your better, your more expensive cars got better, and your less expensive cars got better because they were just using what has already been profitable and in use and used all the time. Same thing about building for the future. Intel chips, they make, Intel makes microchips. What they would do is they have, nanometer processors to figure out, how to create transistors very, very small. So what they do is they have a couple generations of processors that are at 20 nanometers and now 14. I think the new thing is they're going down to 7. So they come up with a new process and they send their high end stuff on that, get all of their money back, and then they keep improving it and improving it and improving it, all the while taking all of the lower end stuff and putting it on the high, the newer machinery, because it's now paid for itself, and the profit margins allowed it to pay for itself, etc. And so you have to build for the future. And if you're going to do that, you can't just be focused. You've got to cast a wide net about what it is that you're doing and creating. And then the next phase, which will be draft, this we would call synthesis, which is basically, once we figure out all of the stuff, we're going to put it together in a particular model, and then we're going to go with that. But before we get there, before we figure out the criteria about whether this is good or that's the best solution for the sets of problems that we have or the goals we want to create. We're going to stick with discover. And to do that, what we got to do is we got to think about things in different layers. So this is a couple of different maps. There's a phrase called "the map is not the territory" by this guy who created general semantics called Alfred Korzybski in a book called Science and Sanity, I think. And basically, what he was saying is we have different layers of abstraction, and if you're going to be smart, intelligent, or if you're going to be accurate about what you're saying, you have to be clear about what level or layer of information that you're talking about. You can say it's precipitating, you can say it's raining, you can say it's wet outside. Those all kind of describe the same processes at different levels. When you're talking to your kid, you might just say, take your umbrella, right? Signifying the same thing, even though you're not saying the actual word rain. So when we're discovering, if we look at a regular map of the physical Earth, they have the image base, which is, like if you went on Google Maps or something, you might actually see the satellite photos, right? And then you Google Maps or Google Earth, you can also look at the elevation, like what's higher or lower. If you go into terrain, you can see that too. And then you'll also see the surface water. There are GIS or graphical information services maps that have underwater tables and so forth. You also see, if you grew up and you went to school, you see political maps where you have, light red, light green, and light yellow, and maybe an orange maps with different colors to signify different states or political territories or countries, depending on what scale of map. Then you have the boundaries of those, and then you have the land use. That's a different set of maps, and roads might be in the same map. So basically what's happening is when you go do research, it's not just, hey, let's think about Earth. You also have to think about the types of information that you need in order to get out of the research what you want. And then, even in addition to those maps, we got another set of maps where we have administrative areas, rights and interests, site addresses, uses and restrictions, ownership and tax parcels, parcel framework, and orthophoto. These are a completely different set of descriptions about the same thing. Before we were looking at the physical geography. Now we're looking at, who owns it, not just what's there. Who is allowed to do what with it. So, what is it zoned for? What are the boundaries of the actual individual parcels that say that, this is my property, this is your property, and, can people walk across my property because do they have, right of way? And, the administrative areas might be, what post office delivers to that, right? So, these are just different layers that you have to be worried about when you're thinking about, undertaking something new. So you got to go to the library, you got to do a lot of research, and then you have to get enough information to sift through to figure out what level of information you need to figure out what you're going to do. If you want to build a house, at some point, everybody's going to have to get clear about, the rights and interests. Can you build this type of thing? Who owns it? Can you build something on somebody else's property? No. Who owns it? How long have they owned it? Can you get them to rent it to you? What's the groundwater like? Like all of these happen in the survey phase. You got to figure out, all of your abstract relationships, the physical relationships, and the social relationships for whatever endeavor you're undertaking. Okay. And, once you do that, you might have 2 or 3 different parcels of land that you might want to use. One is closer to the beach, one is closer to the mountains, or one is closer to, a forest that you like if you're picking a house. So, one might have a river running through it, but it's too far back. You don't have to worry about that because it's a big river and you have kids and you don't want them to fall in and washed out to sea, right? So you have to do your discovery and figure out what exactly happens in this world. If you are in the fashion industry, which is an example we talked about in the design phase, what are the manufacturing technologies that you can use? Everybody uses YKK zippers, right? You look at a zipper, it says YKK. That is a international conglomerate. How does somebody corner the market on zippers? I mean, like, they're this big, but basically they cornered the market because they were the easiest to work with. You could call them up, and they had phone service where somebody was like, yeah, I can get you a quote in 20 minutes. And because they had all the internal processes to allow people to buy whatever scale, whatever bulk, shipped anywhere and all that stuff. They were a very customer service oriented, as opposed to like some mom and pop shop that might only be able to knock out 5,000 zippers a day. So that's just one example. And so if you're in the market for zippers and buttons, and what type of material, is it a polyester blend? How much cotton do you want? How much spandex do you want? How stretchy do you need it? These are the different types of things that you have to research when you're undertaking something in the fashion industry. Or if you're a brand, you may not even have to be the manufacturer. You may want to go into the apparel industry and create a new cotton blend because you like these and you like these, but really we want which one is the middle. So you do something like create Under Armour, where you have a particular fabric or technology that you then use to Under Armour or Gore-Tex. Then you use that to make clothes out of that fit a particular genre or niche, and then go with that. Now the other thing you do is you gotta compare. So you can't just go research this. It's nice to create tables. This is a table by a company or a magazine called Allergic Living, and that compares the food allergies and celiac practices of 16 universities across Canada. So basically, there's like, hey, well, we've got people that are allergic to gluten, are allergic to peanuts, are allergic to all of these things, and we got to figure out, okay, what's going to be the safest school, because you don't want to go to school that kills you. You want to go to a school that does a lot of things to make sure that you stay healthy and well the whole time. So if you're looking at schools and you're allergic, you need to get some type of this research. And, luckily they gave it to you and presented it. But you also need to compile this. So, in your researches, you might want to create a table of, what are the 3 core things that I have to judge things according to? Does it have this? Does it have that? Is it going to have that soon? If you're shopping for cars, in 1970, there were no seatbelts. And I think they didn't make seatbelts until make seatbelt standard until like the mid 80s. I know I grew up and seatbelts were optional, and we had like one long strap across the thing, and nobody said we had to do it. Because I definitely remember jumping over the back seat, right? But eventually people advocated, Mothers Against Drunk Driving was one of the ones that advocated to make seatbelts mandatory. Have to put your kid in a car, have to create a car seat so the car seat doesn't choke the kid when it goes into a crash, all of these things. And luckily Volvo was a company that was really, they were really good on safety. And instead of making that, instead of just making seatbelts a part of the Volvo thing and patenting it, I think they probably patented it and told everybody that they could use it or something. I know that Volvo just gave it to the industry so that all people can be safe. That great marketing, right? And it's great marketing, but also it's a great expression of the values. That's why it's great marketing. The company was definitely trying to say, we've got the world's safest cars. And not only were we trying to create the world's safest cars for their own drivers, they were trying to create safer cars for everybody. So they, gave away the technology to do that. Right. But, while you're doing your research, you're doing your Googles, you're going to look for industry catalogs, you're going to look in different places, you're going to call people that you want to be your mentors, and you're going to do a whole lot of discovery. You have to create a system to compare, the information that you gather. And instead of just looking in 1 or 2 places, you also want to look across categories. And so here what we have, if you're thinking about stories, you can look at TV, movies, music, and internet video. So, well, of course, Acid Jazz doesn't have a lot of stories. But The Big Bang Theory and The Simpsons, they've got a lot of stories. Indie movies, Disney, hip hop has stories. YouTube and web series. A lot of them might be podcasts that don't actually have stories and story structures and things. But if you're looking for content, you can look across different genres to figure out how different genres or organizations or groups use whatever thing that you're looking for in different situations. So you might have a you know Disney, of course, has a lot of movies. So what they're going to do is they're going to create they have the Disney Channel, now they have Disney Plus. You can subscribe to their VHS tapes if you still have a VCR. You can buy a cable package for them. You can go to Best Buy and buy their DVDs, or you can just go stream some Disney movies, buy the individual one from Amazon or Google or whatever. So they have different platforms through which that they can, push their movies. But then they're going to have ads. They're going to have, TV network ads. They're going to have podcasts. They're going to send some of their characters on Jay Leno or the Letterman Show or any nighttime TV or Good Morning America or all these places where they get exposure. They're going to run advertisements in newspapers. They're going to run advertisements on TVs, all to look at put that story into play. And they're going to tell many stories about that story. That how did Simba get away from Scar? How did the guy from the Jungle Book defeat the snake? These are the stories that they're going to try to talk about. And so what you have to do in your research is look in different places and different, across different categories of the types of things that you want to do. And, when you're doing your searching, you got to figure out the different layers of abstraction. So let's say you're doing research on a car, right? We have, the car clearly is the car. Now there's other methods of transportation. You have airplanes, and airplanes are also types of vehicles. Right, you got planes, trains, buses, drones, all types of things. And then in addition, so what's happening laterally is we're talking about different categories, right? And when we're talking going up and down, we're talking about the different scope or how big of a area are we talking. On here, the lowest or the smallest scope are the chassis and the wheels of a car. So, car tires, weigh a couple pounds, but a car weighs a couple thousand pounds. So, by weight, it's a very small volume. But there are thousands of types of wheels, tires rather, or wheels, whether you got 14, 18, or 20-inch rims. The chassis, every make and model has, similar or different chassis. Like I was just talking about Toyota that use the same chassis for multiple generations of cars. And Ford and GM and BMW, they have different chassis. So those are all different parts of the vehicle. So if you're going to go into the automotive manufacturing, you got to figure out, all of the suppliers, all of the manufacturers, etc. Same thing if you're going to go into airplanes, whether you're looking at model airplanes that you throw and pilot with a remote control, or you get in it and flick all the switches. And those are just two types of vehicles. And, boom, you got vehicles as compared to something like furniture, a whole different industry. And then, also laterally, when you're talking about vehicles and in the context of transportation, you also have to think about the passengers or the conductors or, the drivers and the people that refuel these things, the people that maintain these things. These are all inside of the scope of transportation. And when you're doing research, sometimes you got to go up and down and search all over the transportation to figure out the different ways that people use these things and the different ways that people build these things in their industry. Cool. And when you're doing your research, you're going to hit a lot of words that you probably do understand or don't understand. And if you want inspiration outside of what you've seen, I like to think about root words. So what you do is you go and you look at the roots of words, clearly. So, the word credo is a belief. So we have credit, creed, credo, and incredulous. These are not words that I would normally associate with each other, but they have the common word credo. Dis has not a part, disperse, disinherit, disenfranchise, and distend. All start with this. That's a lot easier. But I wouldn't actually say, oh, the commonality between these are that they are about not in part. I would just say they have dis at the beginning because, distant might not. Yeah, distant is a part. Distend. Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to think of a word now that starts with this that doesn't mean not or apart. See? So if you find terms inside of your genre or category that you're looking for, go search etymology online. Look at the root words and figure out whether there are similarities or differences to other words, and maybe that might spark some inspiration about new things to discover for you. And of course, the biggest search engine is Google. Yeah, this is I like LMGTFY. It's a phrase called "Let me Google that for you" because before Google became its powerhouse and people would ask these questions, and apparently not everybody knew that they can just go to Google and do research. So somebody created this thing called "Let me Google that for you," and basically all it does is you go to "Let me Google that for you," put in a word, and then after you put in a word and enter, it then goes to Google. It types in the word for you and hits enter. It's a complete joke, but it's hilarious. If somebody asks you a question that you're not really keen to answer, send them a link to "Let me Google that for you." But Google is a great, fantastic search engine. One of the rival search engines that might have been a little more useful in some contexts was Yahoo. So when Yahoo and Google were coming out, Yahoo basically tries to categorize the world. So when you got search results, you would get a chunk of results about this, a chunk of results about that, and like a hierarchy of a semantic hierarchy that says, oh, this is related to this, it's in this context, etc. So like when you go to when you go to a library's books are organized according to the Dewey Decimal System. So if you ask the librarian for something, they have the Dewey Decimal. They don't know what your book is. They'll ask you what your book's about, or it might be a popular book. But you say, oh, I want to learn about gardening. And in the back of their head, they understand where that fits on the Dewey Decimal System. So they say, oh, that's 428 to 429. That's in this part of the library. Let me walk you through that. Or if you wanted to, read comic books, they'll say, oh, that's in this part of, let's go over here. So then, when they go to different places or different libraries, they'll just basically remap where the locations of those books are, but in the back of their head, they understand and think according to that categorization system. Yahoo was all about that categorization system, and Google was all about that sheer text search. I think Google won the battle simply because their homepage was simple. That's it. I actually think Yahoo was a better search engine, but I'm not going to die on that hill. All right, so how else can you discover what's happening? Look at trade journals. You got to find catalogs, manufacturers' catalogs, suppliers' catalogs. Sometimes you have to pay for access. If you wanted to create a new product line for pens, you wanted a particular shape, you might have to go to the manufacturer. It's not easy to say, who manufactures pens. Then you have to find a number, you have to call them and, figure out that, and, maybe you don't want that company. You have to find out where are lists of manufacturers, where are lists of suppliers. So if you're looking for stuff, you gotta figure that out. And then, what you look for is trade journals, and they'll have lists of these types of things. Of course, popular books, technical books that teach you how to do something, teach you why to do something. I guess that was reversed. Articles, blogs, you take the keywords for your industry, you plug them into Google, you plug them into medium.com, you plug them into Yahoo, Bing, whatever. You just find different places that'll have articles. And then you look at blogs, and then you might also just search specifically for courses and classes. Are there degrees in what it is that you want? Okay, cool. So let's go look at the coursework for that. And let's look at the class descriptions. And then you'll be able to pick out what's important about those courses and those classes and that industry, and look at and use those to then put in the search engine to find more information about what it is that you want, put it into your categorization system, compare things, and then boom, you know what you want to do. Pretty good. Now, while you're all doing all of this, you're going to ask yourself a couple core questions. Is this the best use of your time, attention, and energy, or should you be doing something else? A lot of people just skip the research phase. They get an idea, they go find 3 things to do, and they just start doing it. And then what happens is they hit a wall because they didn't know that there was something else that they had to do before that. Like if you wanted to go, if you want to drive, you can't go drive. You have to get your license first. You can't just walk up and get a license. You have to learn how to drive after you get a permit, right? These are things that you have to do in a particular sequence in order to not get the car confiscated when you're pulled over for crashing into some old lady. We don't want that. Thankfully, everybody had on their seatbelts. So then the question is this the best use of your time, attention, energy, and should you be doing this? So research is a very, what they call a value-added thing. It is useful. It gets you a lot of information that you know before you do things. So research is the best use of your time, attention, energy. What you are researching may not be. If you're researching health, researching the contents of milk and the manufacturing process for milk may not get you to your health goals. It might tell you that you don't want to drink milk anymore, or you're completely fine with drinking milk. So the more information you find, the easier it is to kind of sort through what's low-level information and what's high-level information. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to ask, you're going to ask yourself, reading this article, is this the best use of my time, attention, or energy? Should I be doing something else, right? Also, how are you going to deal with other things that in your life that compete for attention, time, and energy? If you realize you have to sink like 3,000 hours or 3,000 minutes into something, how is that going to impact the amount of things that you're already doing? That's important to know. What do you currently believe and do that gets in the way of progress? So sometimes people say, oh, well, I believe this, I'm going. I think this is great, so I'm good. They're very optimistic. I'm not saying be a pessimist, but people are like optimists. And what I want you to also consider is that you should ask yourself or you should just assume that you have beliefs that may get in the way of you being able to accomplish something. And what you want to do is look at those. You don't have to do anything with them, but you just look at, identify those things that could be sabotaging yourself in the future. And then in the future, if you decide to do this course of action, then you can deal with those. But in the beginning, if you start to figure out what it is that you believe and do that gets in the way of you making progress, that's going to make stuff a lot easier. Because sometimes you might not want to do something because it might be too painful. You don't want to go bungee jumping because, you hurt your hip. And if you jump down, it'd be really painful. That is something that might get in the way of you having a good time bungee jumping. So you don't want to do that. So you have to do an internal search to figure out what's happening in my world that prevents me or does not facilitate me being able to do this. And then also, what are the major milestones for this goal, and can you subdivide them? So, if your education is your thing, do you want to go get an associate's degree and then a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree? Or do you want to just go into a program that gets you your bachelor's degree? Do you want to just take a couple courses and get a certificate because you want to go into, let's say the construction industry? You want to be a project manager, or, you might be able to go to community college and get a little coding certificate, which I recommend. Awesome. What do you have to do in order to achieve this? Sometimes you look at the eventual goal, and sometimes you create a smaller goal that puts you on the path, but that doesn't require a lot of time and energy, right? And then there's also external questions. Those were what it is inside of your body that you already have. What do you want, etc. And then the external is, who are, and how can other people, things and situations interfere with your goal? If you wanted to go to college and COVID hits, hey, maybe you don't want to go to college. because you want the experience of being with other people, but you also don't want to be locked in a room by yourself and not talking to anybody because you got to stay 6 feet away. It's not exactly the experience you want. So what could possibly happen that gets in the way of your goal? What resources and skills will you need to learn, use, and hire? And I say learn, because clearly that's you. Use might be somebody else. Being able to offer you mentoring services or coaching services, or hire, pay somebody to do something. If you're if you're in web development, you might not be good with HTML and CSS. You might just be great in Photoshop. So you'll get somebody to create the HTML and CSS from your Photoshop document, and then you can use that on your WordPress site. Or you might be great at the HTML and CSS, but not good at the design part. So you find somebody to create a Photoshop document that looks pretty, and then you go make that. So you also, if you're going to want to sell all of those services at the same time, what do you have to learn in order to package those together and sell them to people? Or who do you have to hire? You don't have to go look for people. You just have to kind of figure out what's possible, and what you have and what you will need to acquire in order to get that done. Who are the authoritative sources in this area, and what do they say? So some people might have a lot to say about how you can be better at everything that you want to do. Some people might not say anything. They'll say about one little thing or two little things, and there are people that will give you a comprehensive, treatise on all of the things. That's what this course is. Comprehensive treatise on getting any and every goal completed. And how abstract or concrete of information do you need? At the beginning of a process, at the beginning of creating a fashion industry, you don't really need to know about textures, or you don't really need to know about manufacturing and delivering processes and batches for all of your garments. You might just need to know design. You might just need to know that there are people that can do this. You just might need to know that you may need to find somebody that speaks a certain language to talk to the people that are in that country that makes these things. So what you're doing is, ranking or kind of parceling out what type of information you need. And of course, you pretty much go from abstract to concrete. Or if you might start with textures. You might have created a nice cotton rayon blend that nobody else has been able to do. But if you have done that, what's probably happening is you're a manufacturer, so you already have a whole lot of this information. But assuming that you don't, what you want to do is look at the different types of information that you need to find out, and kind of put those in a particular order to make it easy for you to do your thing. All right, and that kind of wraps up what I'm here talking about. And let's look at your homework. Yes, homework, because this is not just me talking. This is, I want you to go do something and use this knowledge and use this in your life so that your goals become a lot easier to do. The more research you do, the easier research will become. One, because you'll be used to finding good articles and good sources of information, and two, because you'll have already known stuff. Sometimes, like this course is basically saying all goals and processes have a particular structure. After you finish this course, you will know way more of the phases of everything that you do in your personal life and professional life. So you'll have to do a lot less research in those particular domains, because you'll have the abstract structure of how to get everything created and done, right? So what I want you to do is go find 15 articles or blog posts about whatever and compare them. Create that nice little chart that we saw before about the allergies and the food practices across Canadian universities. Create a nice little grid, whether you put the top or, what you put at the top or what you put at the side, doesn't matter. And what you're going to do is you're going to fill that out, and you're going to compare what type of information each of those blog posts give and what, some missed. Now, of course, what's going to happen is you can't think about that beforehand. So you read the blog post and you start writing down some of the things it mentions, on the left or on the top. And then when you read the second one, you add it and you make check boxes and you'll fill that out. And then once you do that, you want to, because that is just like a a sequential thing. You'll add to it when you get more information. I want you to take that. Maybe you put it in a spreadsheet in a computer, or maybe you just make another by hand sheet, and I want you to rank them. So then what you do is you put all of the ones that you think are the most important at the top, put the next layer down, the next layer down, and that will help you compare things, not just, according to features and whatever, but what's important. And, you may have 4 or 5 options that check all of the top 5 important things. You can discard the rest, because if something doesn't check all of the important things, whether that's important to you, important to your customer, important to your boss, important to your client, whoever it is, if they don't fulfill the core requirements, just throw them away. You don't have to think about those anymore. And then also think of 2 or 3 things, you'd rather be doing. I like doing this. I like training. I was a teacher. I was a software trainer, talking to people, teaching people new things. That's useful. Everything I want to do in life. I'd also like to be sailing, but sometimes, we can't just sail all day, right? So what we're going to do in the thinking other things is, if you're in apparel and you're in a particular work, section of apparel, what you want to do is think about, are there other parts of apparel that you would rather be in? After you find about all the, if you find out about all of these jobs and processes and companies in where you want to do, you'll also be able to figure out, like, do you want to not be in the role that you're in and move into another role? So that will then shift your relationship with the information. So if you might think of that, or you might think, hey, I don't want to do any of this computer stuff anymore. You might say, all right, you know what? I'm going to go into become a tobacco lawyer, because, I like fighting. That might be a thing. So, and what you do with thinking of the 2 or 3 other things you'd rather be doing is kind of giving yourself a litmus test about how intense and motivated you are about this thing. So, you don't want to spend 300 hours doing research that will then turn into 3,000 hours of actual work if you don't actually want to do it, or it's not going to be effective, or it's not going to scale unless you start factoring in these, possibilities and accounting for those. That can be another job in and of itself. So in addition to looking at inside of the context and looking at all of the things that you could be doing, I want you to look outside of that and think of all of the other things that you could be doing to kind of give yourself a gauge of whether this is actually the right thing for you to do. And that's cool. So next week, or the next module, what we will be talking about is the draft. So we were in design, where we started to figure out, hey, I want to do this type of thing. And Discover, we say, okay, we go look for, these are the types of things, this type of thing, it requires these, like, manufacturing furniture requires these types of processes. So I'm going to go research, furniture manufacturers. And then once you figure out what type of furniture manufacturer you want to be, you go create a plan for a manufacturing plant. You figure out where are you going to get some of the supplies, where are you going to get some of the manpower, where are you going to get some of the machinery, where are you going to get materials, where are you going to get these are the things to try to figure out that process. Now, becoming a furniture manufacturer is a lot more complex than making a piece of furniture. So what you might want to do is figure out just, okay, well, I'm going to start with a piece of furniture. And that a piece of furniture will be your draft, your model, your prototype, or just some example that you can use to figure out how good you are at it, how fast you are at it, how much it costs, other things. But it'll just be your run through. So next week, what we'll be doing is talking about the draft. Or tomorrow, if you are trying to blaze through this course. So this is the Dream Create Hustle course. And thanks for coming. I will see you tomorrow, or as we say, at the backhand side.